Hey friends, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's one of the most powerful ways you can help the channel grow. Every like, comment, and share that you leave in the first few hours of a video tells YouTube that our stories are worth pushing to a bigger audience. With your support, I know we can get to 25,000 subscribers by Halloween. Remember, we never have ads in the middle of our stories. And don't forget, if you want to rep The Darkest Hour, visit thedarkesthourYT.com for exclusive merch you won't find anywhere else. Thanks for being part of this journey. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. There's something about Halloween that feels older than the holiday itself, and it seems to be the one night a year when we invite in the dark on purpose. We carve faces into pumpkins to keep the real ones away and pretend that the ghosts that we feel brushing past us are just part of the fun. But the truth is, not everything that stirs on Halloween is make-believe. And there are some things the world forgets to keep out. Tonight, we're stepping into that thin place Halloween keeps for itself. A place where stories stick with you, giving new fear to the holiday. So, let's get started, shall we? This happened when I was about 13, Halloween night. That awkward age when you're too old to trick-or-treat but too young to go out to parties. So we were trying to come up with something cooler to do, something spooky. My friend Alex said his older brother had found a Ouija board at a garage sale, and we thought that sounded perfect. None of us actually believed in that stuff, but it felt like the right kind of Halloween dare. You know, the nothing's going to happen, but it'll be fun to freak ourselves out kind of thing. We set it up in Alex's garage around 7 p.m. It was cold out, but not freezing, but the air had that smoky smell from all the jack-o'-lanterns and backyard fires. The garage was dim. The only light was coming from 2 flashlights set on the ground and the gaps in the door where the streetlights leaked through. There were 5 of us sitting in a rough circle on the concrete. Me, Alex, Erica, and 2 other kids, Sam and Tyler. The Ouija board looked old, like older than it should have been. The edges were faded, the letters kind of warped. It smelled musty, like it had been stored in an attic for decades. It certainly wasn't any Hasbro. We started asking dumb questions. Is there a ghost here? Do you like candy? Who's the coolest in the room? Honestly. Then the planchette barely moved, and when it did, it was obvious that someone was pushing it on purpose. We were laughing and swearing it wasn't us, taking turns trying to sound spooky. We were just being kids. And then in the middle of us laughing, Alex sort of froze. He straightened up and said quietly, "Okay, which one of you just touched me?" We all kind of laughed at first, but he sounded dead serious. He rubbed the back of his hoodie and said, "Something brushed up against me, like right here." Erica, trying to lighten the mood, goes, "Oh yeah? Let's ask who's behind Alex." She put her fingers on the planchette and started to move it, saying, "Who's?" Before she could even finish, the planchette flew off the board. I swear it didn't slide. It launched across the garage and hit the workbench on the other side of the room with this loud plastic crack. Every single one of us jumped back. We all started talking over each other, yelling, accusing Alex of kicking it, asking what the hell just happened. That's when Tyler said, "I just felt something on my leg." and then Erica said she felt it too, like something cold brushing past them. At that point, all of us were on our feet. Alex turned toward the side door, the one we'd closed earlier. It was standing wide open. Cold air was blowing in. You could actually hear the wind whistling through the trees outside. Alex made a run for it, but right as he reached the door, bam! It slammed shut in his face, hard enough that it rattled the shelves. And that's when everyone just lost it. We were screaming, tripping over each other. Someone was shouting to open the garage door. Alex hit the wall opener, and we all stood there, watching it crawl upward like it was moving in slow motion. The second it was high enough to duck under, we bolted. Half of us ran toward the street, and the other half, me included, tore off toward my house 2 blocks away. My chest hurt from running, but I didn't stop until I was standing in my driveway. We all met up later, deciding to trick-or-treat, still pretending to laugh about it, but you could tell that none of us wanted to talk about what had happened. Nobody mentioned going back into that garage. I know I never did. A few days later, Alex said the board was gone. He swore that he left it in his brother's room, but when he came to look for it, it wasn't there. We never saw it again, thankfully. This is something I experienced back in college, 2002. My roommate and I were driving home late from a Halloween party in the next town over. It was around midnight. We were on the back roads fighting the fog, and the whole drive we just sort of scanned the radio. We were wired on caffeine and sugar, trying not to fall asleep, so we started playing this dumb thing that we made up called the radio station game. One person would scroll through the FM stations, and whatever we landed on, the other had to make up a story about it. It started as a way to stay awake, but it got creepy, fast. Late-night radio is full of weird preachers, old country songs, and talk show hosts that sound like they're whispering straight into your brain. Anyway, we were scanning through, getting bursts of static and half songs when we land on something different. It's a voice, not singing, not music, just talking. It's kind of quiet and buried under some static. But my roommate leans in and says, "Hold on, go back." So I do. We turn it up a little, trying to make out what it's saying, and that's when we realize it's describing us. 2 women, early 20s, driving east on Highway 14, red Honda Civic. They've just left a Halloween party. We both just sort of laughed, awkwardly, assuming it was a prank or some sort of weird coincidence. I mean, what are the chances? But then the voice keeps going, steady and calm. They don't believe what they're hearing. The air in the car suddenly feels freezing. My roommate turned the volume down halfway, but the voice just kept talking, the static pulsing between words. They think they can turn this off, that they can stop it. I remember my hand hovering over the knob. My roommate slammed it first, shutting the radio off entirely. We sat there in silence for a few seconds, both breathing way too hard. But then we started laughing, because what else do you do in that situation? I said something like, "Guess we found the world's creepiest DJ," trying to make it sound normal. But maybe 10, 15 seconds later, the radio turned on by itself. Same station, same static, but the voice was gone. Just white noise. I reached for the dial, and that's when it happened. A scream tore through the speakers. It wasn't a sound effect or feedback. This was a real scream. It started low and then pitched up into something raw, like someone being hurt. And then it just stopped, cut clean off, mid-breath. The stereo was off. No power, no lights on the console. But the sound was still ringing in the car and echoing off the glass. We pulled over on the shoulder, sat there for maybe a full minute, not saying a word. My roommate finally reached over and unplugged the stereo fuse from the dash. We drove the rest of the way in silence, the kind where you can actually hear your pulse. The next day we tried to find the same station, every frequency, every stretch of static. There was nothing. No trace of that voice. No broadcast in that range. Anyway, it's been over 20 years, and I've driven that same stretch of highway dozens of times. Never turned the radio on. Not when I'm alone. I haven't talked about this in a while, but every Halloween it comes back to me, so might as well. I was 10 years old, still a kid, but at that age where you and your friends wanted to trick-or-treat without parents tagging along. The promise was that we stayed close to our street, only went to houses that we knew, but it felt like freedom. That year my costume was super basic. Black sweatpants, a black hoodie, and one of those cheap glow-in-the-dark skeleton masks with a thin elastic band. I'd picked it out at the drugstore the day before. My two friends had similarly thrown together costumes, a vampire cape over pajamas, a plastic witch hat with a poncho. We were walking in a little cluster, trying to hit as many houses as we could before our parents called us in. The sidewalks were crowded with families, older kids, strollers. Somewhere around the third block, I noticed another kid across the street, wearing my exact costume. Same black clothes, same cheap skeleton mask, same size even. He was just walking alone, trailing a few houses behind another group of kids, but not talking to them. I remember pointing it out to my friends, and we all just laughed. It was Halloween, tons of kids and skeleton stuff, so no big deal, right? But after that, I started seeing him over and over. Every time we turned a corner, no matter where we went, he'd show up again. Sometimes a few houses down, sometimes standing at the end of a driveway, just watching. He never came up to the doors. He never asked for candy. He never spoke. At one house, I glanced back and I saw him under the streetlight on the opposite corner, totally still. My friend asked what I was looking at, but when I turned back, he was gone. We tried to make jokes about it. Your evil twin is following us. But I started to feel weird. My stomach got tight. It didn't feel like another kid anymore. It felt like something pretending to be a kid. Near the end of the night, a bigger group of older kids that we knew caught up with us. One of them pointed across the street and said, "Hey, that's you," and started laughing. Everyone turned to look, and there he was again. This time he was closest to us that he'd ever been. Same size as me, same hood, same glowing mask. Just standing in someone's yard, watching. Nobody else was around him. I wanted to go over and say something, but I couldn't. Something about it felt wrong. We hurried back toward my street after that, skipping houses, candy forgotten. Later that night, after my mom made me dump my candy out for inspection, I went to my room. I hadn't changed out of my costume yet. The glow of the mask on the dresser made the whole room feel strange. For some reason, I looked out the window before shutting my blinds. And he was there, standing across the street under the streetlight, looking up at my window. Same hoodie, holding the skeleton mask. I was looking back at me. I dropped to the floor, hid by my bed for what felt like forever. When I finally peeked out again, the sidewalk was empty. I barely slept. When I told my friends the next day, They said it was probably just some older kids messing with me. But it was me, looking at myself. That's what it felt like. That's what it was. I don't know if it's a doppelganger or a mimic or just some sort of cheap mask. But I do know that that night at 10 years old, I saw myself walking around town and later standing outside my house. This happened when I was a kid, probably around 10 or 11. It was one of those perfect small-town Halloweens. The air was crisp and you could smell pumpkin guts and cheap fog machines, and every house on our street was lit up and decorated. Except one. It was this old 2-story house near the end of the block. No decorations, no lights, just the faint orange glow of a porch bulb that barely reached the steps. I remember we almost skipped it, but then someone noticed a big plastic bowl sitting on the top step. There was a paper sign taped to the front that said, "Please take one." It was the only house on that side of the street without decorations, so we figured maybe the people weren't home, but still wanted to hand something out. I went first because I wasn't afraid of a dumb prank. I leaned down, holding my pillowcase open, and that's when I noticed the bowl looked weird. It wasn't full of bright wrappers like you'd expect. It looked dark. I remember frowning and thinking that maybe the candy was covered in fake cobwebs or something. But when I got close enough, I realized it wasn't cobwebs at all. It was moving. I jumped back so fast I almost fell off the step. Everyone laughed, thinking I was just trying to scare them, but I swore I saw something wiggle. So my friend Jenna stepped forward and said, "Oh my God, they're fake bugs. Calm down," and reached in to grab one. The moment her hand touched the candy or the bowl, everything inside the bowl started crawling. It had to have been hundreds of bugs, spilling out, moving. Crickets, beetles, roaches, centipedes. Bugs I couldn't even identify. The whole bowl was alive. Jenna screamed and dropped it, and the bugs scattered across the porch, over her shoes, down the steps. We all took off running. We didn't stop until we were halfway down the block. I remember looking back. The porch light was completely out. We told a few other kids what had happened, but they went to check it later. The porch was empty. No bowl, no bugs. Nothing there. We didn't go near that house again. When I mentioned it to my parents the next day, they said that place had been vacant for years. The owners died when I was littler. It'd been sitting empty ever since. I know we didn't imagine that bowl, so somebody else must have set it there. Call it a prank, but it was disgusting. We lived on 5 acres about 15 minutes outside of town. My dad had a small barn that leaned even worse than the mailbox. Half of one wall caved in from a windstorm years before I was born. He always said that he'd fix it next spring. He never did. Halloween was quiet out there. No trick-or-treaters. No neighbors close enough to walk to. Usually Mom would make popcorn, Dad would fall asleep in his chair, and my brother and I would watch the same stack of VHS tapes, Ghostbusters, Beetlejuice, The Fog. That year, I was 11. The only light outside was the one above the barn door. It hung from a metal bracket and threw a weak yellow circle onto the dirt and grass. We had to flip the switch from inside the barn itself, which meant that one of us had to run out there with a flashlight if we wanted to turn it on or off after dark. It was just part of the scenery. Every picture I have in my head of that place includes that light. That night, we'd just finished carving pumpkins when the bulb over the barn flicked on. Nobody had been outside. We would have heard the door. The switch was way in the back near the workbench, too high for animals to bump. It wasn't motion censored either. Dad hated those things. Mom told Dad to go turn it off before it attracted bugs. He grumbled, but didn't move. That man could sleep through fireworks. I remember joking that maybe the old barn finally wanted to celebrate Halloween. The light stayed on. It didn't stay steady. It swayed. Not flickering like a bad bulb, but moving, like something was walking underneath it, and the shadows were shifting. My brother said it looked like someone was pacing. I told him it was probably the wind, but the trees weren't moving. Dead still night. We both stood by the window for a long time, watching the glow shift around the doorframe. I kept waiting for Dad to notice, but he nodded off with a beer in his hand and the TV flickering on his face. After a while, my brother asked, "You think someone's out there?" We didn't have close neighbors. Nobody came up that driveway unless they meant to. My stomach started feeling heavy in that slow way that tells you that you're scared, even before you realize it. The light started to swing wider, slow, left to right, like it was hanging on a cord and somebody was pushing it. But the fixture didn't hang. It was bolted to the wall. That's when I saw a shadow move across the barn door. It wasn't shaped correctly. Tall and narrow, the shoulders were too high, the arms were too long. It slid across that strip of light and disappeared again. My brother saw it too. I could tell because he stopped breathing. We moved away from the window at the same time. We went to wake up Dad. He didn't believe us, obviously. He went out onto the porch, muttered something about raccoons, and grabbed his flashlight. I remember the sound of the screen door slapping shut behind him, and the way the flashlight beam bounced down the path, and how the light from the barn stretched long over the field. He stopped halfway there. We saw him turn his light toward the trees, then toward the barn again. He called out just one sharp, "Hey!" and then nothing. After a minute or two, he came back. Said there was nobody out there. No footprints or animals. Nothing. But the light was off now. He said that he turned it off himself. When he came back in, he smelled like rain and cold dirt, even though it hadn't rained that night. We went to bed after that. In the morning, Dad went out to feed the dogs and didn't come back for a bit. When he finally did, he looked pale. He said the barn light was still on. He didn't mean the bulb was glowing. He meant that the switch was off, the cord unplugged, but the bulb itself was faintly lit. Just a dull orange, like the leftover glow from a wood stove. When he touched the fixture, the light died completely. He didn't tell Mom that part. I only know because I followed him out there that afternoon, and I heard him muttering under his breath, trying to plug the cord back in and cursing when the bulb stayed dark. That night the barn smelled like burnt dust and something else, like wet wool, left too long by the fire. He said maybe a mouse got into the wiring. He replaced the whole thing the next week. Still, for the next few months, the dogs would bark in the direction of that light after sundown. It wasn't towards the road or the house, it was always the barn. Years later, when we were packing to move, I found the old light fixture sitting on a shelf in Dad's shop. The metal arm was warped, like it had been twisted by hand. The socket blackened. He told me not to throw it away, said that he wanted to hang on to it for parts. But Dad never reused parts. He just couldn't bring himself to toss it. Now when I drive past the old property, the barn's completely gone, collapsed in on itself. The new owners keep horses where it used to be. I always slow down when I pass, even now, if I'm out there after dark. I swear I can still see a faint glow. It's just low and unsteady, a single bulb swinging on its own. I don't really know what we saw switching that light around. I don't think that it was a prank or a bad bulb. It felt older than that, like something that had been there before us, living quiet, until that one Halloween when it was apparently given permission to stretch its legs. I've told parts of this story before, but never the whole thing, and never in writing. It happened back in the late 90s, when I was 19 and thought that I knew everything about fear. I'd just gotten off a shift at the diner where I worked. The place stayed open for the bar crowd, and I was walking home at 1 a.m. I didn't have a car yet, and the quickest route to my apartment was through the old cemetery at the edge of town. I'd cut through plenty of times before. Everyone did. It shaved 10 minutes off the walk. And back then, I didn't put much stock into ghost stories. Halloween night, though, it hit different. There was fog hanging low, and every house I passed still had the last of their jack-o'-lanterns burning on their porches, faces half collapsed, candlelight fluttering behind soggy toothpick smiles. The whole town felt emptied out at that time, like the party was over, and the night was trying to tuck itself in. When I reached the cemetery gate, it creaked open like it always did, loud, rusty. The path through the middle was gravel, uneven. I had a flashlight in my jacket pocket, but I didn't bother turning it on. The moon was bright enough, and I knew the way. Halfway through, I started hearing music, just faint, carried on the wind. At first, I figured it was somebody's radio from the road, maybe a car parked nearby. But the deeper I went, the clearer it got. This slow, crackly old tune. It sounded like it was coming from one of those wind-up record players. Not a song I recognized, but definitely from way before my time. It kind of stopped me cold. I stood there when it was at its loudest, straining to listen. The wind had died down, the trees weren't moving. The sound was close, too close for where I was standing. When it cut off just mid-note, like a switch had been flipped, I felt every hair on my arm stand up. I remember telling myself it's nothing, maybe even a prank, somebody messing around in the cemetery. But even as I said it, I could feel that deep, gut-level knowing that something wasn't right. And then I saw a lantern. For a moment, I thought that it was a flashlight beam cutting through the fog, but the light was warm and soft, swaying slightly, like a candle inside glass. It was moving along the far side of the path, maybe 30 feet ahead, bobbling slowly between the headstones. I called out, just a quick, "Hey," thinking it might be the groundskeeper. No answer, but the light stopped, and whatever was holding it turned towards me. I couldn't see the person holding it, but I could feel them looking at me. You know, when you have that feeling that someone's watching you, even if you can't see them. It was like that, heavy and pressing. Then, just as I took a cautious step forward, the lantern started moving again, only this time faster. Not a smooth walk. It jerked side to side, the light swinging wildly, like whoever held it was stumbling or running. I backed up a few steps and reached for my flashlight. But before I could turn it on, the lantern light blinked out. I was left standing in the pitch black. Not even the moon was showing through the fog anymore. That's when the gravel behind me crunched. One step, then another, slow and steady. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand, and I hit the switch. The beam caught nothing but mist. No one there. But the sound kept moving, circling me, like something pacing just beyond where the light reached. I don't know how long I stood there before my legs finally decided to move. But when they did, I ran, full sprint. Didn't care about the path, didn't care where I stepped. When I hit the gate again, I could hear something faint behind me, like a voice, almost a whisper. But I didn't stop to listen. I really didn't slow down until I was in front of my apartment door, panting, flashlight still on and flickering. I told myself it had to have been a person, some drunk cutting through the same way. I still don't really know what I saw or felt that night. All I know is that ever since then, whenever I hear old music playing from nowhere, my stomach sorta turns. Some things you can shrug off. That night isn't one of them. I've told this story a few times over the years, on podcasts, late night AM radio shows, even once to a group of students studying urban legends. But this will be my first time writing it down. But it happened in the fall of 1986. I was 12. My mom worked at a department store called Harrison's, one of those mid-size regional chains that doesn't exist anymore. It was the kind where the carpet always smelled faintly of perfume and dust, and the mannequins were old enough to have fingerprints baked into the paint. Every October, the store put together a small haunted attraction in the empty space beside the seasonal aisle. Cheap black curtains, fog machines, paper skeletons, that sort of thing. My mom helped coordinate the displays and costumes, so the week leading up to Halloween was always a blur of late nights and coffee. That year, Halloween fell on a Friday. I remember because I'd begged her to let me come help after school. She hesitated at first, but eventually gave in, probably figuring it was better than leaving me home alone. When we got there, the store was already closed to customers. The only lights were the harsh overhead fluorescents and the faint orange glow coming from the decorative lamps in the home section. The place looked different after hours, emptier, quieter. You could hear every sound, the squeak of a rolling rack, the distant hum of the refrigeration units in the break room, the click of my mom's heels on the tile. The mannequins were everywhere that night. Some were lined up near the front windows, waiting to be dressed for the holiday sale. Others were still posed around the haunted display, fake cobwebs, rubber spiders. They were old-school mannequins. No faces or features, just smooth painted heads and stiff plastic fingers. They looked too human from a distance, but not human enough up close. My mom put me to work untangling strands of orange lights while she reorganized props for the next day. I remember humming along to whatever song was playing over the store's intercom, some soft rock ballad that had probably been looping for hours. Everything felt kind of cool until the intercom cut out mid-song, just click. Silence. My mom called out that she was going to the back room to check the breaker. I nodded and kept working. A few minutes passed. I was kneeling near the front display, wrestling a plug into an outlet, when I noticed one of the mannequins near the entrance looked off. It was facing the front door as before, but now it seemed angled towards me. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe my mom bumped it when she walked by. But when I glanced again, it felt closer somehow. I laughed under my breath. "Okay, funny," I said out loud, expecting my mom to pop out from behind a rack. Nothing. I stood, brushed my hands off, and grabbed another strand of lights. And then I froze. The mannequin's head was tilted now, just slightly, but enough that the reflection from the overhead lights glared off its blank face. It was different than before. I remember the air feeling different all of a sudden, too, like the store's AC had shut off. My heart was hammering. I could feel it in my chest, in my throat, in my ears. I couldn't figure out why. I tried walking backwards and nearly tripped over a pile of costume boxes. When I looked up again, the mannequin was back in its original position, facing the front, perfectly still. I told myself that I was tired. I'd been at school all day, then straight here, and it was getting close to midnight. I turned the radio on my mom's workbench to drown out the quiet. It was just static at first, and then some local DJ talking about a Halloween parade downtown. It wasn't enough to drown out the sounds, though. First, I heard something soft, like something sliding across the tile. Not quite footsteps, more like a heavier object. "Mom," I called. No answer. Then the sound stopped and started again, closer. When I turned around, one of the mannequins that had been propped against the wall near the dressing rooms was now in the middle of the aisle, still upright, perfectly balanced. I stood there staring, waiting for it to fall or move, but it didn't. But then I noticed smudges on the floor, long, faint gray streaks, like something had been pushed or dragged. Once again, I stepped backwards, but I bumped into something, another mannequin, behind me. I hadn't even realized that something was that close. I spun around, and for a split second, I could have sworn that its arm was half raised. That broke me. I started running, bolted for the stockroom, yelling for my mom. She came running out, startled, asking what happened. I told her what I saw. She laughed nervously, but said maybe I'd bumped a display, freaked myself out. I wanted to believe her, so I just did. We stayed. She still had work to do, but I didn't leave her side. I remember just looking at all the mannequins, and eventually even that made me uneasy, and I found myself just facing away from them. Finally, we gathered our things to leave. As we walked out toward the front entrance, I glanced over my shoulder for the last time. The mannequins were all standing in a neat row, but they were facing us. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. We just locked up and left. The next morning when she came back to finish cleaning up, she told me something that still makes my skin crawl. All of the mannequins had been moved. Every single one. They weren't where we'd left them, where we'd seen them. And there were drag marks on the floor again. Deep ones, leading all the way from the front display to the stockroom door. The manager thought that it was a prank, maybe some of the night crew messing around. But the security cameras didn't show anyone in the building between midnight and morning. And no activity. Just them being in different places. Harrison's shut down a couple years later. The building's been turned into some kind of outlet now, but I haven't gone inside. I can't. People like to laugh when they hear this story. They come up with all kinds of explanations. Settling floors, vibrations, paranoia, imagination, whatever. And maybe they're right. Maybe my tired brain turned mannequins into monsters. But here's what I can't shake or explain. Mannequins don't balance themselves. When they're not on their stands, they shouldn't stand up. They certainly shouldn't be able to move and turn. And they did all of those things. I was, 12? And I saw them move. And my mother, she did too. I'm nearly 50 now, and I can't walk past one without looking twice. My childhood best friend, Courtney, had a secret that only I knew. The truth we shared must have haunted her to her final days, if only because she knew that I knew. It's a truth that still haunts me. And I was never able to look at her the same again. She could have killed me that night. That's what I think. But by the time the idea crossed her mind, it was too late. All of these years later, I shudder. I used to question myself if she'd been telling the truth about everything, but I witnessed her dark miracle firsthand, start to finish. For obvious reasons, I've changed some details in the story. And this was 30 years ago, and Courtney was on the soccer team in college. She'd gotten a full-ride scholarship to play, and she was the kind of player you noticed immediately. Big fish in a small pond back home, but in college, surrounded by sharks. She was always the athlete, and I was the quiet type with a job at the mall. We used to joke that we both worked jobs we didn't like just to stay in school. By junior year, scouts were coming to see her play, but near the end of the season, she tore something in her leg. It was bad. Bad enough that the doctors told her she might never play again. Courtney didn't accept that. Not for a second. The very next day, she started her own rehab routine. Self-designed, intense, borderline obsessive. But the progress wasn't what she needed. She was running out of time. That whole semester, I barely saw her. So when she finally called one night to invite me to a Halloween party, I said yes, before she even finished the sentence. She told me that our mutual friend Ava would be driving. It all seemed so harmless and fun. Looking back, it was the first small choice that would haunt me for life. It had been snowing all day. A slick patch of ice on the highway sent the car over an embankment halfway to the party. The world went sideways. Metal, glass, screaming, and then silence. I woke up, dizzy, pressed against the passenger window, my seatbelt digging into my ribs. The car had landed on its side and was now completely buried in snow. It was pitch black, cold enough that my breath came out in clouds that I couldn't see, but I could feel. I couldn't tell if anyone else was alive. Pain shot through my legs. Broken, I think. But I dug into my pocket and found my lighter. The spark of it barely lit the inside of the car, but it was enough to see Ava hanging upside down from her seatbelt above me, blood dripping from her hair. Her eyes flickering, unfocused and closed. Behind her, Courtney. She was awake. Her body was twisted in an unnatural position. Her back pressed to the door, her arms stretched wide, holding herself up between the headrests, like a spider clinging to the ceiling. When she finally moved, it wasn't to help Ava. She lunged, her hands wrapped around Ava's throat. Before I could react, she started to squeeze. I wanted to scream. I tried, but my ribs were cracked. My lungs were too weak to draw air. My arms definitely weren't going above my head. The sound of Ava's neck snapping echoed like a tree branch breaking in the woods. Courtney whispered something in a language I didn't understand, tore a lock of Ava's hair, and let her hang limp again. The lighter burned my fingers and I dropped it. The car went dark. When I found the lighter again and flicked the flame, Courtney was staring at me. Eyes empty, expression calm. "Why?" I whispered. She didn't answer. Not then. After what felt like forever, I whispered again. "Why?" This time she spoke. Her voice was cold and sharp. "Ava died in the car accident, right?" When I didn't answer fast enough, she said it again, louder. "Right?" I managed to breathe out a yes. She told me to give her my hand. When I couldn't, she grabbed it herself. The pain nearly knocked me out as she sliced my palm with a shard of glass. She pressed her own palm into mine, blood mixing. She chanted words I didn't understand. "Bound in blood," she said. "And betrayal on our word will result in death." I thought she'd lost her mind, or maybe I had. But then she told me, "We'll be rescued soon." And she was right. While we waited in that buried car, I was in and out of consciousness, and Courtney told me what she'd done. She said she prayed, begged for help, not to God, but to something else that had answered when God wouldn't. It told her what she needed to do to get her life back, to trade a soul for a future. "Almost like cars," she said. "You can't leave a lot without a trade-in." Ava, she said, was her trade. A good soul, pure. A Rolls Royce, she called her. I remember how calm Courtney sounded when she said it. Like it wasn't murder. Like it was math. Hours later, she counted down from 30 out loud, and right when she hit 0, I heard a man's voice outside. We located the car. Minutes later, the fire department was cutting us out. Courtney stepped out of the wreck under her own power, without help. I was taken away on a stretcher, unable to walk or lift my arms. In the ambulance, I remember I tried to explain to the EMTs. Courtney did it. And before passing out, the last thing I said was Ava. But for weeks after the accident, I couldn't sleep, and nothing happened. But when I finally did sleep, it wasn't rest. It was flashes of snow, glass, Courtney's face watching me in the dark. When I could finally walk again, I went to see her. I needed to know what really happened in that car. She looked perfect. Healed, whole. Like she hadn't just crawled out of hell. I told her everything I remembered. Every sound, every movement. When I said that I saw what she did to Ava, she cut me off. "You had a head injury," she said. "You were unconscious. The doctor said that it's normal. People imagine things, hallucinate." She smiled when she said it. Calm. Too confident for somebody who should have been haunted. I tried to argue, but she was firm. "You didn't see anything. Ava died in the crash. That's all. It was an accident." I wanted to believe her. The police, Ava's parents, everyone believed her. I wanted to believe her. I did. But something about her voice, it sounded like she'd already told that story too many times, and I just dropped it. She hugged me when I left, but I felt nothing but cold. That night I dreamed that she was strangling me. It felt real. Her hands pressing down, her face right above mine. That dream, it reminded me of something I'd felt in that car. After Courtney had bound us by blood. It was like she could read my thoughts. Maybe I could read hers too. But basically, the conversation that I was explaining to her that we'd had, I knew it hadn't been out loud. It was through our thoughts. The day that I'd had this dream, after I'd gone to see her, I heavily considered telling somebody what I remembered, or thought I remembered. But after having that dream, it was too real, and I couldn't. It went on for months, until finally, I stopped answering Courtney's calls. She must have left me alone because she knew I wasn't going to say anything. We drifted apart because I let us. Her limp was gone, and she went on to have a dominating senior year. Her dreams came true, and she was picked up by a women's soccer league on the East Coast. She even went on to compete in the Olympics. Years later, decades really, I dreamed of her again. It had been so long that I almost didn't recognize her. She was standing in the snow, surrounded by flames. Her clothes, her hair, everything burning bright. She was screaming and she was laughing at the same time, calling my name through the fire. Then she fell forward, still laughing, until the light went out completely. When I woke up, I didn't feel panic. Just this strange calm. I remember thinking, that's odd. I haven't dreamed of her in years. It felt final, like some kind of sick goodbye. Out of curiosity, I found myself looking her up. Maybe part of me just wanted to see her name again. That's when I found the article. Courtney had died in a car accident. In the snow. They said she hit a telephone pole. The car went up in flames before anyone could reach her. Months later, someone I knew from college told me more. They said that it was brutal. A head-on collision. The car exploded on impact. They found her seatbelt was still fastened. The same way that she'd been found the first time. Only on fire. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of our first Halloween episode of the season. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're regular, your support means the world. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night, and keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. Of course, subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Special thanks to the Darkest Hour channel members, Lori TESDAHL, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, T. COLTDADDY Eagle, Mallory Dominguez, Carrie Watkins, Pilar Guillot, TREDEN WIXSON, Larry Hill, Ripley, JOJO STARCHER, Mary Patrick, Debbie LaFreniere, Julie Bourdelais, Jennifer BECK, MARINA LACHNER, Make Hamilton Home, Evan Pratt, Mary Hineline, Katharine Yes.ImtherealKatie Isabelle, Landshark, Danielle Hecht, Mama P, Keziah Pietersen, Amber Baker, Khris Lauzon, Kara Geos, Marvin Allen, ForgottenruinsTV, Ravenwolf, Carlos, Stacia Gillette, Nate Black, Jill Harper, Kathy Balkenbush, Cosmic Chick, Sierra Guerrero, Deanna Kuzma, Nathan Bremer, and Demian Forrester. Big thanks to all those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons, Tracy S., Mary H., Tanya F., Tamara K., Monica L., Zoe Watt, Shelley B., Donald C., Marion T., Rat Girl, Alicia S., Aaron G., Nikki H., Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendan G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Tony P, Lizanne, Arlene F, Adrian, TF Parham, Jason G, Lori T, Bobo Jenkins, Rachel S, Linda W, Eric, and Lynn Drefless. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour, or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.